All right. All right. It looks like we are live. Conscious Approach live streams. This is, I think this is the fifth one that we've done. Fifth live stream.
Yeah, I
So
think so.
yeah, kind of crazy. But yeah, this is the fifth live stream that we have done. October 26th. JV Wins is here. Dogon SS is here. We thought we would talk about a couple stories over the last week. First up, Jamie Foxx, a guy whose work that I admire. Pretty much going back to the mid 90s, or even he's been around since the early 90s, but in Living Colors when I first learned about him. But he's 53 now, so Jamie Foxx is approaching elder statesman status, and he put out a book. He has a new book out called "Act Like You Got Some Sense." I think is the name of the book. And so you know how these people, they put out books, so they go on press tours and talk to the media and whatnot. And his comments about marriage is what caused some waves. Had him trending over the last week. And essentially, what Jamie Foxx was doing was basically talking about how he is not somebody who is on the marriage thing, right? Marriage ain't for him. He ain't with marriage. Not that he's summarily against it in totality, but for him, he just talks about how it's not for him. And I guess, a part of why this has become a talking point is because of how crazy the state of marriage and dating and relationships is currently in most westernized societies, in America is included within that umbrella of westernized societies. We've talked before in the past about how the very notion of relationships fundamentally is currently undergoing a facelift. Um, the way people view them, how they are basically turning into a transactional deal as opposed to something that is, tantamount to a good situation for both people involved in terms of raising families and all of that good stuff. That kind of stuff is going out of the window. And what we are seeing being ushered into modern society really is a transactional type deal. Relationships and marriage and all of that kind of stuff fundamentally is just not what it used to be. Um, and so, Jamie Foxx, you know, uh, part of what had people sort of wanting to pry into why he feels that way about marriage has to do with the fact that he has two daughters. And so, I guess the idea is if you're raising two young women and you have these views on marriage, you know, how would you want them to see marriage? Do you want them to be in fulfilling marriages and relationships and blah, blah, blah. But be that as it may, you know, uh, to read some of the quotes that Jamie Foxx provided in terms of, his views on relationship and all of that. He said, quote, the 2.5 children, the wood paneling on the station wagon and the cottage. I didn't think that was for me. Growing up, Corinne was like, well, people are married. Corinne is the name of his oldest daughter, by the way. And he said, growing up, Corinne was like, well, people are married and that's what they have, my friends. But then a lot of those marriages ended up not doing well as the kids got older. Unfortunately, we saw the kids get fractured from their families. Us, we actually came together more. So I don't know what that is. I just know that it is different, but it's a whole lot of love. The pressure of me being married, I don't think we've even had conversations about it. They just love their daddy, and I just keep it moving. I always live in a place of guilt by sometimes living my life if I feel like I haven't put the time in with my kids. There's nothing like that. There's no feeling that you get when your kid smiles and is happy to see you coming. She's a producer on my own show talking about his daughter again. Doing the TV show, dad's, he says that his daughter comments about, him embarrassing her, just, kind of being funny. So, and he goes into greater detail, but, the gist of it is that he's talked about how, he doesn't feel pressure despite his age or his status or his situation. He doesn't feel the need to portray an image. He doesn't feel the need to comply or conform to societal's expectations of what a well-rounded family situation is, which largely still exists within the context of husband, wife, and kids, right? Even though we're seeing a lot of that change, He does not care about the fact that he's 53 and all of this. He's not bothered. He doesn't mind co-parenting. Marriage isn't something that he cares about. It is what it is for him. And, I think, the reason why something like this is interesting to me is because, you know, if you kind of take a step back and look at what the current landscape of dating and marriage and relationships is, what I, in my opinion, am seeing is a phasing out of a large segment of men who are having to make who if as a man, marriage and family and relationships is something that you're still about, you're having to make a decision. And that decision, from what I can tell, is I can either lower my preferences and standards so that I can find a woman who is willing to date and marry me, despite the fact that she is below what my typical preferences and standards are, or I can be single for the rest of my life, or I can try to take the gamble and maximize on my self-improvement and play the long game so that I can get the kind of women that I want, because the kind of women that I want are actively participating in hypergamy, and they are only making themselves available to the top 1 to 10% of men. And so as a result, there's a large segment of men who are involuntarily celibate, who are non-reproductive, they're not getting married, they're not having children, simply because most of the attractive women have excluded them from their preference set, and they're only going for the top 1 to 10% of men. And so, in saying that, I'm almost misspoke. I said Dave Chappelle, kind of alluding to our next topic. But Jamie Foxx is somebody who exists as that top 1 to 10%, right? So he's a guy who, in terms of money and resources, and I'm not a guy, so women can speak to this, but probably in terms of physical attractiveness as well for a man, he is able to still be able to successfully navigate the minefields of dating and relationships, because he's reached the status socioeconomically that affords him the opportunity to be able to date and marry the type of women whom he would want to do that with. And yet we're seeing that classification of men themselves go their own way and avoid marriage. And I think that's interesting. And I think a guy like Jamie Foxx, who to my knowledge hasn't been involved in any negative media publicity stories. He's not been involved in too many stories that can be harmful to his career. He hasn't said anything that is an affront to the hyper-liberal base in America, where they'll cancel your career if you say something that's disagreeable. Like, Jamie Foxx has pretty much played the long game. He's smart. He's stayed in his lane. He strikes me as a smart guy who doesn't make rash, illogical decisions. And I think what guys like Jamie Foxx are seeing is, Jeff Bezos, divorce, Jeff Bezos' wife is filing for divorce from him. And in the settlement, the settlement is awarding the now ex-wife $38 billion, right? Billion with a B. So guys like Jamie Foxx are kind of looking at the landscape and they're saying, is this something that I want to involve myself in? Jeff Bezos' wife instantly becomes the richest woman in the world via divorce, not because she built something, but because she got with a guy who built something. The marriage dissolved itself, and now she is awarded $38 billion as a result of that settlement. Not saying that everything is about the risk of divorce and the settlement that comes after divorce, but just the general statement of everything that comes along with the prospect of marriage. In addition to things kind of being so treacherous nowadays, where, women are active hypergamists, and they make themselves exclusively available to the highest bidder, essentially. And even as a man who can afford a woman such things, you never know when she sees the opportunity to upgrade in lifestyle and trade you in for the next guy. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with Jamie Foxx's aversion to marriage, but I'd be hard pressed to think that it doesn't at least play a small factor. And it's just interesting to me that even guys with money and resources who exist at the top of the food chain in terms of being um, ideal marriage prospects for most women, women who exist at the top of the food chain in terms of the types of women that most men seek. I find it fascinating that even those guys are saying, I don't think that this is for me. And I'll be 60, 70, 80 years old. And if I don't think that it's the right situation for me to get myself into, I'll just forego marriage for the entirety of my life. And I'll be a co parenter and I'll just live as a bachelor until I die, and I'll just live with that decision. And, it is what it is.
Well, no, it makes sense to me. I agree with a lot of points you made there, especially the fact that Jamie Foxx is in a privileged position more or less when it comes to his income and his status. So he could more or less afford to just not, you know, be with one person the entire time. So at that point, he could afford to live a quote unquote bachelor's lifestyle. His, his whole life basically, his whole adult life, he can do whatever he wants.
Mm,
I'm Jamie Foxx, and then so the women are going to be all in line for it. So he's more or less speaking from a position to where he's coming from, where it's like, why should why should I get married? Why should I get married for what? And so if he gets married, it slows down everything for him. From what I hear from Jamie, he loves to party. All right, he loves his Hollywood parties where he's having a good time and everybody's having a good time. And if he's living like that and moving and living his best life in that capacity, then he's really not the kind of guy to stay in a monogamous relationship in the first place. So it really doesn't serve him at all, really,
yeah,
like at whatsoever. Now,
right.
for the average Joe and the guy that works a 9 to 5 and he believes in monogamy and he believes in one itis, all right. Eventually, what I'm saying, the way that things are going, that's a little too traditional. That's a little too traditional of a mindset. And the way that everybody is moving nowadays, apparently, it seems, is everybody wants to live their double lives. And they want to live a life where everything is a fairy tale on the front end. Oh, yeah, boo boo, I love you. And then on the back end, they're living this shadow lifestyle to where the whole dynamics of sneaky links and side pieces is
Yeah,
the lifestyle.
yeah.
Like it's the norm right now. And so why would you marry somebody that subscribes to the get the bag culture, WAP culture, and sneaky link culture? Like there's too many cultures going on within our culture, and none of these things are conducive to healthy monogamous relationships.
No, it's all dysfunction. Yeah,
It's all dysfunction.
yeah.
So there has to be something that gives here. And my thing is more or less people's, especially from our generation and going forward, is to recalibrate what we think a functional relationship looks like and what it is. And unfortunately, it's not going to be the traditional form of what monogamy we were trained on. It seems to be something else. And so, uh, to piggyback also on the aspect where you're talking about, hypergamy and stuff like that, and a more my stance on all of that stuff is that I believe it's their nature because of I don't like using the word evolution, but just for like survival and stuff like that. Because when you're dealing with women, all right, um, you're dealing with people who realize that physical domination isn't their game, so they have to be manipulators, and they also have to choose up for the survival of herself and the kids, if you will. So if there is a society and it's based off of a monetary gain and stuff like that, and the people with the most money are the ones that are most likely to survive, well, then women naturally are going to gravitate, because also within this male society, or this society run by men, it's a man's world type of thing or whatever. All right, there's this thing where men are in higher positions and stuff like that, and so women seeing that their place isn't so much in the world when it comes to like having jobs and stuff like that. So their whole thing is, well, since we're not allowed to really work like that, how else are we supposed to make money? So then what they do is they find a guy. So their job, women's job, what they clock in to do every day, is to find a man with a bag. That's her job. Then once she finds the man with the bag, then her job is to secure the bag, make sure that she plays her role for about 7, 8 years, make it the marriage look like it's something, all the while living off the lifestyle, and then off the back end get the divorce. All
Mhm.
right. And then, so the back end off the divorce is the ultimate cash out. Hey, I invested in this stock. I rolled this stock out for X amount of years. I found a new stock. This stock has more potential. I'm dropping this old stock. And then they're cashing out.
Yeah.
So off of that one stock, they got a lifestyle off of it. You know what I'm saying? And now they got recurring checks coming every month. All the while they got a new person that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so for me, I believe it's more of a survival mechanism for women versus it being anything else than, a malicious act. And I know you weren't saying was, but
Right.
it's more or less survival than a malicious act from them.
Right.
So if we understand as men, if we understand where women are coming from more or less, you know what I'm saying, as a species, you know what I'm saying, and we understand where they're coming from when they're asking us these questions, because they'll ask us these questions like probing us, and they probe us all the time, shit testing us and all types of stuff to see where we're at in our masculinity all the time. And so whenever they're constantly getting a beat on us, it's kind of one of those things where, um, you know, they're hitting us from all angles. And so they're hitting us from all angles. And it's basically whatever resistance we give them is a form of masculinity. And whenever they can really penetrate and stuff like that, that's where we're not masculine at. And so whatever shape that they give us when they're shit testing us, asking all these questions, it takes on a shape. And if it's not masculine enough at the end of the day, she knows exactly where you're not masculine at, and she knows exactly where to not be attracted to you at. So as soon as she has a hypergamous situation where she sees in a situation where on the outside looking in, this guy is perceivably more masculine than the man that she's dealing with, then that's when she gets the FOMO, and then she feels as though that she's missing out because her man at home isn't as masculine as she thinks he needs to be. So with all of these elements going on with modern forms of feminism, modern form ways of thinking and stuff like that, which is not conducive to women overall, I think it confuses the situation. I think everybody's confused. And I think so what men need to do is understand the nature of women, and then and I think women need to understand their nature too, honestly. Understand it better. And men definitely need to understand women's nature, so we're not confused and frustrated when they do what a woman does. You know what I'm saying? And so right now, should men in as a whole be getting married when women are thinking the way that they are? I agree with Jamie Foxx. I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
And if the structure is set up the way that it is, and guys are continuously getting screwed in the court system and stuff like that, then honestly it really doesn't serve you to go through all of that mess.
Right.
So I agree with Jamie Foxx for a myriad of reasons, as I just explained. But I really think that, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, when it
Yeah.
comes to what I believe the nature of women is and
Yeah.
why they're hypergamous and stuff. But I
Right.
really think there needs to be more of a dialogue with why women are hypergamous and how men can navigate that so they're not victims of it anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack with what you said.
Mhm.
So, like, first, I want to address real quick the idea about uh, women engaging in hypergamy because their place in the world isn't of a working capacity or professional capacity. I think that for the most part, that's a fallacy. Like, if you look at current data and statistics, there are now, of course, because America has historically been built on a patriarchy, it's still not equitable. So don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that I'm not suggesting that it's equitable, but there are more and more women CEOs, VPs, presidents, and especially when you're talking about the that middle class tier, that 35,000 to 60, 65, $70,000 a year salary range, and a lot of those professional positions. Women are occupying more and more of those positions than men. Women are outpacing men when it comes to that, more now than ever before. So this idea that their role is, because they've been so kind of hampered down and oppressed to the point where they have to engage in hypergamy from a survival standpoint because that's their place in the world. Not saying that you were suggesting that that is a fact, but I've heard that before, and it doesn't wash with the current data. Like, that's a fallacy. Like, we're seeing more and more women today being given opportunities to succeed in the highest levels of corporate America, in the highest levels of government, in the highest levels of American industry. So again, I'm not suggesting that there's just as many women in those seats as men, but there's not this huge gulf the way somebody who thinks that way would try to suggest that there is.
Okay, so let me ask you this though. So now I hear what you're saying. So if we're talking about CEOs and all this other stuff, so that's a small percentage of the jobs in America.
Correct. Yeah.
And so that's not even all the whatever jobs. Now I agree with you that women are getting higher paid positions and stuff like that, but that's more or less a new phenomenon. And the reason why I believe, and I'm going on another tangent, but the reason why I believe women are trying to achieve these other jobs is because they don't want a man controlling them. And if I make more money, then a man has a harder time controlling me. So women are out there trying to get these positions of power so they are not controlled by a man.
Right. So here's where I'll contend with that, because I don't think that that's completely incorrect. So I brought that up to bring up my next point about, well, to address the point that you made about women who are hypergamous, not because they're doing so maliciously, but because it's sort of baked in their bread. It's like embedded in their nature. I think that that's 100% correct. So don't get it twisted. Hypergamy is something that has existed for centuries. Basically, since the dawning of, basically since the beginning of human civilization, the men who got to procreate were the kings and the leaders of the tribes and all of that kind of stuff. And that eventually evolved as society evolved into the fittest of the fit in terms of men get to procreate and reproduce and all of that kind of stuff. So from that standpoint, it is nature. But what I think we're seeing is a shift, and this is why I think a lot of what you're suggesting is a fallacy. What we're seeing is a shift. A lot of women, like you brought up a man's masculinity. The ironic part about the way that these things are shifting is a lot of the basic fundamental foundations that relationships and these sorts of things are built upon. Gender roles, for example, a lot of the traditional notions of these things aren't going anywhere. So no matter how much money women make, they're still going to be attracted to, they're still going to find that what they would like to be in a relationship with and the type of man that they want to get married to is that of the masculine variety.
Yes.
And no matter whether a guy is rich or poor, if he's masculine by nature, he's going to assert himself within the context of that relationship. Period. Right. So a woman, regardless of how much, a woman who's making a lot of money, in my opinion, I don't think that she's doing so to position herself in such a way to not be controlled by a man, because, and we go back and forth arguing semantics. Like, I don't want to argue like the word control, right? Like, I'm not trying to suggest that he's controlling her, but at the same time, most functional relationships operate in such a way that each individual within the context of that relationship adhere to certain roles in order for that relationship to function accordingly. So if women are inherently attracted to masculine men, then that man is going to assert himself in a certain type of way that one might perceive as controlling, if that's what your point of view is.
Right.
But most women naturally gravitate towards those kinds of men. So
Right.
the whole money thing, and so I bring that up to say that the reason why the hypergamy thing is sort of changed is because it doesn't matter how much money she's making or not making. All women nowadays, and this is a result of westernized conditioning and social media and the internet and all of these messages that are kind of being thrown at people on a constant basis. You're looking through your Instagram feed and you're seeing what this person's doing or what this person's doing or whatever. You're getting constantly inundated with these messages, right? And these imageries. And what we're seeing is, I watch the Fresh and Fit podcast all the time. And they always have a group of women on their podcast. And they always ask these women, what are the basic qualifications for a man whom you're looking for? And it doesn't matter how much money these women are making. These can be women who are cashiers at Popeyes, who work at Forever 21, or these can be women who run companies. It doesn't matter how much money they make. They all say the same thing. I want a guy who's 6'4", who makes at least $300,000 a year, who is doing all of these different. They all say this. It doesn't matter what their socioeconomic bracket is. So whereas traditional hypergamy says, if I'm a temp or I work in state or local government and I'm making $30,000, $40,000 a year, traditional hypergamy is a guy who can support me and the family, who maybe makes 50 or 60 or 70 and is financially responsible and is mentally stable. Traditional hypergamy stipulates that guy is good enough for her. But modern hypergamy, 2021 hypergamy is, even if I work a job making $30,000, $40,000 a year in a temp office, if you as a man are making $50,000 a year, that's not good enough. If you're not running a business making $200,000-$300,000 a year, if you can't take me on multiple jet setting trips around the world twice a year, if you cannot accommodate me in this capacity, you're not adequate.
Right.
And so that's where I think hypergamy is taking on a different form. The barrier to entry has gotten so high, right, that women have essentially excluded 90% of the men. 100% of the women are making themselves exclusively available to at most 10% of the men. So you have 90% of the rest of the men who are adequate, but they're falling victim to this new age form of hypergamism. And so even for a guy like Jamie Foxx, who can be successful within this context of dating a relationship, even in the modern day, because he's equipped to do these things. Even a guy like him is saying, I don't like how this is going, and I'd rather not involve myself within that dynamic. I'll just stay single, do my thing, casually date, get what I want out of women, embrace the notion that this is transactional, and the moment that the transaction is over with, I'm going to move on to the next situation, because that's what women do. So, it is what it is. Like, that's what I think is going on with a lot of this stuff. The whole MGTOW movement, men going their own way. Like, it isn't this aversion to marriage. It's just the imbalance of it. And a lot of this imbalance is victimizing the vast majority of men.
Okay,
And even like, you even got, like, I've seen this, bro, with my own eyes, bro. And, I've seen with my own eyes single mothers, women who are overweight and out of shape, who have multiple kids by multiple men, believe that they deserve a man who makes more than 6 figures a year.
Right, but why?
And I don't know. I honestly believe that it's because of two things.
Mm-hmm.
One, I believe it's because they're addicted to social media. So they spend too much time scrolling through their Instagram feed and seeing what their girlfriend or what their girl who they like, some girl who they went to school with, some girl who they knew in high school, some girl they went to college with, maybe a coworker. they maybe they follow them on Instagram, so they seeing her husband or her boyfriend taking them on trips and doing all of these fun things, and so they become jaded. And you brought up the whole FOMO thing. Maybe in their minds, they're experiencing a certain degree of FOMO and saying, I want that for myself. Why can't I have a man who's like that? Completely not taking into account the fact that those women who get that are able to give the men what it is that they seek, which is childlessness, physical attractiveness, and a lack of psychological dysfunctionality, right? But they don't see it that way. They just say, as a woman, because of the sake of my existence, and I got this thing between my legs, that's what I'm entitled to, regardless of my baggage. I think social media has a lot to do with impressing that mindset upon them. And then the second thing that I think is going on is, whether we agree with this or not, no matter, despite how much baggage she may have, there are still some dudes who are willing to give them some modicum of attention, who are willing to spend some of their bag on them in some capacity. And so they get indoctrinated. They start feeling like, well, I'm just as good as the next chick who doesn't have baggage, because I still got dudes hitting me up in my DMs trying to slide. Right? So that takes me back to my general principle that we as men hold the ultimate cards with a lot of this stuff. Because if we stop feeding the beast and basically taking back some of the power and control by dictating that we maintain some of these standards, a lot of this will subside. But while we don't do it, a lot of these women are taking advantage of an inherent weakness in today's modern man. But a lot of this stuff, and so even a guy, again, to bring it back to the central point, Jamie Foxx is kind of saying, I don't want no part of this. Even though I can do what it is that, modern society dictates is required for me to be successful in navigating this minefield, I'm going to stay far away and keep to my own, because I don't want to be mixed up in a lot of that nonsense. And for the rest of us out here, the 90%, we have to sit here and make those one of three choices. Lower our standards, go relationship-less, marriage-less, childless, or take the gamble on self-improvement and play the long game. Those are the three choices that we have to make, but that's really what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, as far as the hypergamy thing, because you said quite a bit there, so I lost what I was going to say, but I remember the hypergamy. I remember hypergamy thing, and so the answer to that is not that. So when I speak about hypergamy, I'm talking about the day-to-day, hand-to-hand combat that goes on between men and women. All right. So this isn't grandiose stuff that's online. This is day-to-day interactions with women that everybody has. And so when there's just a regular guy who works a regular job, and that woman did do hypergamy in that situation because she's dating the supervisor or somebody that makes more money than the regular people.
Mm-hmm.
So she is practicing hypergamy there. All right. They practice hypergamy until they get the ultimate score. All right. So 6'4", $300,000 a year. That's the NBA. That's the league.
But I'm not to cut you off, but I am merely suggesting that what you're saying, what you're describing as the ultimate goal, the NBA level, what I'm suggesting is that is becoming normal hypergamy.
No.
That is what is becoming the baseline form of hypergamy.
Right. Well, that's it's league or bust, right?
Yes.
And so hella high water, I'm getting to the league.
Yes.
And so even if I got a guy that's nice enough on the way to the league, I'm dropping him for the league. And so I get what you're saying. They're going to practice hypergamy until they hit that figure and that guy. And they're going to keep practicing it until then. All right. But like we talked about Bezos and all this other stuff, where it doesn't matter how much you make. It doesn't. So this is my thing, bro. Hypergamy lasts as long as they can get a check out of it. So when I say it's the league, it's the league because eventually they can get a check from that guy when they divorce him. It's not deeper than that. Okay. I don't want to work for real. Yeah, I got my degree in this and degree in that, and Yeah, I want to pay for it all or whatever, but I want somebody to take care of me, to jet set and do all this other stuff. And so I don't want to spend my money. I'd rather spend his. And so with that mentality, and then they and this is what I said initially, they cash out on a lifestyle, and eventually, once it ran its course for whatever reason, then they get the divorce and they get half, and it's a cash out. It's all an investment. It's all a game.
Yeah.
It's a business opportunity that
Mhm.
as men, we're the only ones looking at it like marriage now. Women have been treating it like a business opportunity. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why it is really not in a man's best interest, because women are strategically on purpose using the system in order to get stuff up out of it. To get
Yeah.
stuff out of men, because it's cheaper. I mean, listen what you have to do. Only thing you have to do is just find a man that makes that much money. Give up the vagina enough so he buys in. Brainwash him, do whatever you need to do. And then now he's married you. You didn't have to go to school for that. No, there's going to be some women that say, oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But you didn't have to go to school for that. You didn't have to do any extra preparatory work, but to just look good or whatever these girls are trying to
Yeah.
do nowadays.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so,
that's what OnlyFans is. I mean,
yeah. And so they
all
can't.
these things are just ways for women to profit or, gain an upper hand just based solely off of the sake of just for being, right? Just for existing.
Right. But check it out. So I hear what you're saying. But what my angle is more or less is that women aren't overall as a group disenfranchised people. They're not.
No,
All
they're
right.
not.
But
No.
at the same time, all right, they're not on the top of Fortune 500 companies. They don't run those. They're not. Those aren't built in the image of their last name. So when we're talking about overall wealth and power in the world, it is overwhelmingly men. So when we're talking about how can women in their logic, how can they achieve in a world that's built by men and run by men? And on top of that, they have a different nature than us completely anyway. So my thing is that their hypergamous way of being. See, I'm not. I think hypergamy is regular. Like you said, it's been going on since it's been going on, and it's reached a new level now due to social media. So I'm not disagreeing with none of that. So all I'm saying is that the type of hypergamy that's going on right now is the evolution of hypergamy, and men need to get with it because women aren't going to go back. So if we now know that women are going to do this, what Jamie Foxx said makes sense, and that brings together my whole point. And so there could be semantics that could be debated in the midst of how you view hypergamy versus how I view it, but at the end of the day, what we're saying is pretty much the same.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just think that from a practical standpoint, there's always going to be there are always going to be economic brackets. So long as America remains a capitalist society, there's always going to be economic brackets. You're never going to, yes, the current form of hypergamy is here to stay. But my argument is that is very dangerous.
Yeah.
That's a very dangerous thing because regardless of whether, like I said before, 100% of the women are exclusively making themselves available to 10% of the men. So even though we can acknowledge that this form of hypergamy is here to stay and it's not going anywhere, it's dangerous nevertheless because it is excluding the vast majority of the population of men. It is exacerbating traditional hypergamy to the point where it doesn't look nearly the same because before hypergamy meant what you described, which was I'm gonna date the supervisor. Listen, it's human nature. You should, as a woman, you should strive for the man whom you can get that is compatible with you, that is in best position, money and resource wise. That's human nature. I don't fault women for doing that. But what I'm saying is the dynamic is what we're looking at is that is no longer what hypergamy actually is. And now what hypergamy is an unreasonable sort of evolution of it which dictates that even if you're the general manager of a retailer, it's not adequate enough. So what we're going to start seeing is right now that percentage is 90%. But what we're going to continue to see is that number is going to become 92, 93, 94, until eventually 95% of men aren't reproducing and only 5% of the men are. And on the flip side of that, these women, because the number one thing that women complain about when it comes to marriage, like, what I see a lot with, with these debates about who's at fault for why marriages are crumbling, men or women, women talk about how difficult marriage is. And the number one reason why they talk about how difficult marriage is because of issues of fidelity. Men always cheating, right? Men are dogs, men always smashing different chicks and all of this kind of stuff. Well, the reason why that's going on is because all of the women are only after 10% of the men. So as a man, if I'm one guy, right, and let's say that I walk into a supermarket and there's 10 women in that supermarket, no one else is in there, and all 10 of those women are after me. That's a 10% ratio, right? So I, as a man, have zero incentive to commit monogamously to one woman.
Exactly.
When I have 10 women to choose from.
Exactly.
There's no logic in that. So for you to practice hypergamy to the point where you're excluding such a large swath of men, and this is a general statement towards men, women collectively, not any one specific one, but just to this whole phenomenon in its entirety. When you're positioning yourself to exclude a 90% swath of the men, you get what you ask for. No man is incentivized to monogamously commit and want to care enough about a marriage to make it work when he has all of the options in the world. There's no math there. I am not incentivized whatsoever to do so.
Okay, so here's what I'm saying. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's always been a thing too before social media.
Yeah, it has been a thing, but what I'm saying is...
Hold on. Now, there's always been that guy in the hood that had, I don't know how many baby mamas, and everybody knew it. That he was a Rolling Stone. He got kids all over the place, right? It's always that guy. Now, why is it that guy? What does he do that domesticated man doesn't do? And so my whole point is there's something more primal that needs to be addressed here, a more ancient way that needs to be addressed here. And so you're absolutely correct. So when those 10% of men who are getting to the bag so much that they're getting so many women, the women don't care when you make that much money. They don't.
They don't care, but then they do, because they'll be the first ones complaining about fidelity. That's one.
No. So here's what it is.
Yeah.
So if you were dumb enough to get married and you're that guy, then the fidelity and stuff like that's going to work against you when it comes to court and all that stuff because you was openly cheating. All right.
Yeah.
But then there's a situation where these women don't care. They don't care if he's cheating. They just don't want to know about it. And if they know about it, that's when they get offended. They'll snoop and stuff too and try to find something, but hide it. And my whole thing is they don't really care. They care to ruin the marriage. And that's it. But overall, they're attracted to, on a primal level, a guy that can get other vagina.
Absolutely, yeah. Sure.
And so their whole thing, that's why it's so ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
When the same ones that are talking about hypergamy and the ones that justify it so much so, but it's just like, if you understand the essence of what hypergamy leads to, if they follow it way up the corporate ladder, if you will, they'll realize that guy that's way up there, they have to share him. And so women eventually don't care that the jock superstar football player, he smashes all the girls, right? But the girls still go after him. Why? He's not relationship material.
Yeah, but they don't care because of his money and resources, which you could argue is a primal thing. But that's not primal that's not primal from the standpoint that guy just exudes so much masculinity that he has all the women. That is literally he is a top 1 to 10% in terms of money and resources.
Right.
Now,
Which
the,
is
the, the,
masculinity.
the, the manifestation of that, nevertheless, of course, is he has multiple options. And I do agree with you 100%. Women are only attracted to men who get attention from other women. It is a signal to them that he is desirable. But that desirability, I would argue, doesn't really come from anything primal. It comes from his socioeconomic status, in particular, his economic status. Because we see, listen, there are plenty of guys who I know personally, and just watching some of these dudes, like especially a lot of these pro athletes, there's nothing masculine about them at all. But they nevertheless are successful with women because of their success in life. So again, the result being that they have multiple options, and women are attracted to men who have multiple options. But I don't know about the primal aspect of that. There's no masculinity inherent in a lot of these guys.
But I mean, that's fair. That's fair. But I would say that
it's not,
what
bro.
guys
Like,
he talking about?
look,
What
like
guys he
no,
talking about?
like no. I'm just saying, like, women today are making these decisions based off of practicality, and to use your word, business decisions more so than ever. Is there a primal nature of this? Yes, if you sort of strip it down and talk about the rest of the population. But when you're talking about women who say, when it comes to being in a relationship with a guy, the only man that I'm interested in is a guy who has this kind of height and makes 6 figures at least, that is a very specific notion that has nothing to do with anything primal and more to do with, as a woman existing in 2021, to be in a relationship with me requires this. Period. It's not any deeper or more complicated than that. And so men on the other side of that coin, such as Jamie Foxx, who aren't comfortable with that level of disingenuousness, are deciding, I don't need marriage, rightfully so.
Why?
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Because the utility in it is complete. There's no utility in it. It's completely gone. It's evaporated. And so I think that it doesn't extend any deeper than that. And, I don't like to bang on women or talk about the mindset of the modern woman, because I do think that ultimately they are just taking advantage of an opportunity. And if you don't like this, then make them, get rid of the opportunity, take the opportunity away. And how you take the opportunity away is not bending the knee and just giving women whatever they want just because they exist, just because of the sake of their being. Stop subscribing to their OnlyFans pages. Stop liking their photos and their videos on Instagram. Stop paying them in currency or attention. That is some of the ways that you can sort of stem the tide of a lot of this, so that people like Jamie Foxx and people such as myself can start to see a silver lining and say, maybe there is a reason why I should get married. But until that happens, all we're going to have is this chaotic situation that we're currently in. That is what I think Jamie Foxx is speaking to when he talks about how he has never thought that that was something that was for him, because he's been in the limelight for decades now. So he was sort of ingratiated to a lot of this well before social media was a thing. So what he's lending his words to now is something that he's been around for 20 years, over 20 years, now 30 years, however long that he's been in the spotlight, right? So that's what I think that he's speaking to. And, it obviously helps for him to affirm that decision when he sees a guy have to fork over $38 billion in a divorce settlement to his wife just because.
Yeah, she finessed herself.
Yeah. I mean, she, it is what it is, man. But that's pretty much all I had to say about that. I didn't know if you had any more words to that one.
No, we went hard on that one.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Well, I mean, I just think I think there are some subtle nuanced differences in the way that we are discussing things like hypergamy and how that pertains to relationships. But I think ultimately we're saying the same thing in terms of the end game,
Right.
which is, the nature of women, whether it's primal or calculated. I think that it's more calculated than primal these days. But whatever those differences, nuanced are, I think ultimately we're kind of saying the same thing. And I just find it interesting that even guys who are in positions like Jamie Foxx are saying thanks but no thanks.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, so we'll go home. We'll move on. Next topic that we're going to talk about is an interesting angle in the ongoing conversation with Dave Chappelle. People are still trying to protest Netflix to get Netflix to remove his stand-up special because I guess they think it's just not. I don't know. I don't know what they're complaining about anymore. I guess they're suggesting that Dave Chappelle is intolerant and that shouldn't be on net. I don't know. I get lost with who's offended by what these days. I don't get it anymore. I think a lot of people are just bitching and moaning and whining and complaining for nothing, essentially. But there was a video of somebody put out a video and he gave his take on the Chappelle outrage. And I just wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about that because I found it to be interesting. Just as an FYI to anybody who doesn't like profanity, there's a fair amount of profanity in this video. So if profanity is something that you don't like, or if you're turned off by profanity, then just fast forward through this video, to when we are no longer playing the clip. But otherwise, here it is. So this is a video that I found on WorldStar. This guy is a gay man, and this was his opinion about the Dave Chappelle outrage. This is his perspective.
Hey, motherfuckers. Well, I'm going to go ahead and chime in on this whole Dave Chappelle bullshit. Now, I watched the motherfucking special,
Mute your mic,
and I was not offended at all. And I'm very motherfucking gay. The only thing I don't do is wear pink and motherfucking fingernails and makeup and all of that shit because it offends me, motherfucker. But anyway, what I'm going to say is this. The LGBTQZRLMNOP motherfuckers, every goddamn day there's a new motherfucking gender, and I'm tired of it as a gay man. So as a heterosexual man that was telling the story about his transgender friend of over 20 fucking years, y'all skipped all over that part to be a motherfucking offended. That's some idiot bullshit. Y'all so quick to be motherfucking offended by shit, but very unquick to be offended by what this goddamn Republican Party is doing. The fact that the filibuster has made sure that there's no motherfucking anti-lynching laws. The fact that Texas is now stripping women of their motherfucking rights to have a legal abortion. Be offended by that shit. But you offended that a motherfucker's telling his personal story about a transgender woman that he was friends with. Y'all need some motherfucking medication and a goddamn chill pill. As a gay man, I'm tired of all of this bullshit that we put quote unquote straight people through because we assume that they're attacking us. He was actually letting you know that even he has had an impact in his life by someone that was transgender or part of our community. Get the fuck over it, bitches.
All right. Were there some audio issues with that?
I heard a bit of an echo, but it's all good. I was making sure that my mic wasn't giving the feedback, but it's all good, bro.
Okay. I didn't hear any feedback.
Okay.
Would I have heard it or not? If there were
I heard it on my end. We'll see what the back end audio sound like, but I heard the echo.
okay.
So, yeah, it's all good.
Well, that was so yeah, that was an interesting take on that. Hopefully the audio on that sounded okay. If not, then post talk, I'll put a link to this video in the description box so that you can listen to it. But I didn't hear anything crazy, but maybe that's because I was the one who was playing it. But nevertheless, I thought that was an interesting take from somebody who comes from the community who's supposed to be offended. Now, it reminded me of something that I have always said when it comes to Black people and playing the racism card, which is, and this is my opinion, so I'm not saying that I'm universally correct. I'm just saying this is always, I've always been of the belief that when you overplay certain things in situations where they might not be necessary to be played, you sort of oversaturate your message to the point where it's going to cause people to tune your message out.
Mm-hmm.
So what I always kind of felt about the whole, racism angle was when you spend an inordinate amount of time calling everything racist as Black people, non-Black people who would otherwise be sympathetic to your message are going to tune you out because they're going to say, well, you just call everything and everybody racist. And, my whole point was, let's be fair and reasonable. Not everything every time is racist. So let's call it for how we see it and try to dig into the story and be a little bit more responsible with how we play that card, because we just might find out that certain situations aren't actually racist. And I think that there's a parallel with what he's saying, because essentially what he's saying is not everybody who expresses their disagreeable point of view is necessarily being transphobic or trans, whatever you want to say, because I can't keep up with how many different classifications there are. I've lost count. Pretty soon it's going to be every letter of the alphabet. I don't know. But I think that that's what this guy was saying, and I thought that that was an interesting take. Nothing too super deep, but it did remind me of how I used to always kind of say, can we not always call every single thing racist? Because, believe it or not, sometimes something is just nuanced, but not necessarily racist. And, my concern was always that people just get tired of hearing that, to the point where they're just going to say, well, I don't need to listen to you because no matter what the situation is, you're always going to say everything is racist. So now what we're seeing is divisions within the ranks of these people, where some of them are saying, can we calm down and take a step back, with always categorically categorizing somebody as being anti-trans or anti-gay or trans, whatever, transphobic, blah, 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 whatever. And let's actually listen to what he's saying or they're saying and take their message in totality without jumping to the conclusion that we have to be offended at all times.
No, fair. And I think because first I'll start off by saying the guy that was in the video, he seems to have a comedy background. So he seems to have good timing when it comes to talking and stuff like that. He's clearly one of the funny people in his circle, in his group. So he clearly appreciates the art of comedy. So I'm sure he already came from that angle of already feeling like people in the LGBT community take stuff too seriously. But on top of that, I would also add to the fact that he appears to be a fan of comedy, so he gets where Dave Chappelle is coming from. All right. And as far as the LGBT community is concerned, all right, I believe that it's the same type of co-opt movement like Black Lives Matter, like the feminist movement. All right. All of these movements were co-opted. They all started the civil rights movement. All of these movements began with organic grassroots concerns about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because whether we like it or not, all right, you know what I'm saying, or acknowledge it or not me and you, but other people in the LGBT community, they did. I mean, it was actually, calling somebody gay was an insult.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we've come from that being a thing where, it was so much of it as an insult to the fact where it was like, hey, man, some of these people are living like this and they can't do anything about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And, however they were gay, is it nature and nurture, who knows, whatever. But this guy likes men like that and he's not coming off of it. But he seems pretty cool. So get off his back,
Right.
Get off his case. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So that type of stuff, I get all of that. And so the dude that's in the video, he seems to be that kind of dude where it's just like, hey, man, I'm gay. What about it? Who cares? I don't get so, caught up in all the rhetoric that's being said on TV or what have you. But what ends up happening is, like the feminist movement, like the LGBT movement, like Black Lives Matter, all of these are liberal agenda pushed,
Mm-hmm.
where it's no longer about the protected groups that they're claiming to be protecting. They're exploiting those protected groups
Yeah.
in order to push further agendas.
Yeah.
So this is just a ploy, honestly, from that same liberalistic arm, if you will, to do more forms of censorship when it comes to people having their opinions about things they are entitled to have an opinion about. If
Mm-hmm.
somebody's entitled to be gay, somebody should be entitled to disagree with homosexuality.
Absolutely.
And so
Yes.
homosexuality is a behavior, it is an action, right? And somebody can disagree with somebody's actions if they want to.
It's
That's
no
not
different. It's no different than disagreeing with the way that a woman, like if a woman was walking down the street, with her dress, you know what I'm saying, like looking, half naked. It's more socially acceptable to disagree with that than to disagree with, as you said, the behavior of a person, actively being gay. When
right.
it's not a matter of right or wrong, it's just a matter of ideology and just disagree, not agree, but that's it. Move on. Okay, the person disagreed. That's it. That it really is no. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with this type of, I don't want to call it, with these agendas that's being pushed as far as these liberal agendas to get everybody to accept everything, you know what I'm saying? What it does is it creates, I'm all for equality. I'm all for treating everybody like a human, so long as they're not doing nothing crazy. I have nothing against, anybody. You know what I'm saying? So it's a thing where these agendas are so wrapped tight that it's hard to take a stance on it because you sound like you're being hateful
Mm-hmm.
because the angle that they choose to take. And so they choose to take an angle of, hey, if you don't agree with us, you're being hateful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's a thing where it's just like, hey, look, I don't agree. I don't agree with you guys, but at the same time, I'm not being hateful. I have an opinion, much like how you guys have an opinion. And so does Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
And so Dave Chappelle didn't say anything about, hey, go out there and kill.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, go out there and hurt,
Mm-hmm.
name. He wasn't dehumanizing them.
He never suggested that they shouldn't be accorded humanity. Yeah.
No, he didn't say any of that.
Yeah.
He said a joke.
Yeah.
And so, and like we discussed last time when we discussed this, comedians, they leave no stones unturned. If it's going on in society, comedians, it's their job to make fun of it.
Yeah.
And so if you are a group of people, and so now the LGBT community is no different than a race of people, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so every race of people has their jokes. The Mexicans have their jokes. Black
Mm-hmm.
people have their jokes. White people have their jokes. Well, now it's gay people's turn.
Yep.
So gay people, it's your turn to have jokes. Everybody else got them.
Yep.
And so, but like I said, so with this liberalist agenda, what it's done, and so we've already talked about what it, how feminism from the last topic, all right, how feminism has an impact on gender roles and stuff like that, all right. But how did that become a thing? Because of liberal agendas.
Yeah.
And so, same thing with this whole LGBT stuff. It's bullying people. All right, this is bullying Dave Chappelle. Honestly, I believe. All right. Not the LGBT community, the people that invest
the people who champion it. Yeah.
There you go.
Yes. Yeah.
And that stuff. And so that guy in the video who's part of the community, he says I'm not. It's just like a black person who's part of Black Lives Matter, but he's not. Hey, Black Lives Matter is doing its own commercialized form of woke that I don't subscribe to. Do I believe Black Lives Matter? Absolutely. Am I a part of that organization? Hell no. Do I agree with everything they do? Hell no.
Right.
So the same thing with gay people. There's gay people that I work with. There's gay people that I done heard on social media outside of this dude that don't agree with everything the LGBT community does.
And you're 100% right on that. And, just to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying when it comes to the machines that pick up these messages to try and amplify it to push an agenda, the majority of the outrage is sort of created, if you will, by
Yes.
people who don't even exist within those communities. Right?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think I brought up the point to you before
Mhm.
about, how weird it was to watch those protests last year, the whole with BLM and all of that. And you see people in these videos, you see people making these videos and stuff, and the people who are in the streets. And it was like the non-black people, particularly the white people, were acting more outraged than the black people were.
Yeah.
And that to me was like weird because you're not a part of the community. So it sort of struck me as, well, I have benefited from this privilege for so long. I think I mentioned this to you off camera, but it's like you're trying to reconcile
Mhm.
the fact that you have benefited from this dynamic by
Mhm.
going over the top with your outrage. And the whole thing is like, bro, if you're going to be an ally, be an ally, but you don't have to be so forceful
Right.
with your outrage to the point where you alienate people who have different opinions.
Right.
And I completely agree. I think that that's exactly what's going on. This is the latest example. This is the latest movement where we're seeing this taking place. It happens every time with every preceding movement. We've seen this, and this is just the latest one to which that is happening.
Mm-hmm. No, totally agree. And it's a wild dynamic. We'll see how Dave responds to this.
He said, I'm not coming off of it. Yeah.
Good. And
Yeah.
because this is a thing where there needs to be a dialogue at this point. And this is one of those things where if it gets swept up under the rug, then it might be perceived as an L, for people who aren't being hateful, and there is some level of entertainment that's still left on the bones when it comes to talking about people. And we should still leave that there because it's really not hateful. It's all about the intent of the comedian. If the comedian was up there being hateful, then okay, Netflix, take it down.
Yeah.
But if he is being a comedian where he's blanketly and evenly distributing the trash talk to every group of people he talks to, including black people,
yes,
then what's the problem?
I don't know.
Nobody else is up in arms. You see what I'm saying?
I don't know what the difference is. I don't.
And so that's what I'm saying. That what they're preaching is they're trying to normalize. They're trying to normalize critique. Normalize not being able to critique them. And it's not all of them.
No, it's not.
And that's what I'm saying. It's honestly a minority of them who are in privileged positions and these liberal agenda things, because they got a myriad of liberal agendas. This is one of them. And so it's those people. And like you said, man, the media makes an outrage.
They have a lot to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, the media does this. If everybody was watching it and it was like, haha, Dave, he wow, haha. If social media was just talking about it and if it was just all about Twitter posts and Instagram posts and Facebook posts, more or less, I think it'll come out on top that Dave was just being Dave.
Yeah.
And the media was like, he said what? Crucify. Bring out the cross.
Yeah.
Bring the nails out.
They start it all. It's always what I've noticed is that it is always, again, and I don't want to make this a racial thing, but I'm going to just report what I see. and you know what I'm saying? So I'm not trying to be racial, but this is what I've noticed is that it's always white liberals in the media, journalists and reporters who have a decent enough platform on Twitter who put that out there. They started. They start. You know what I'm saying? It's like they throw a little gasoline on the ground and throw a match on it, and to see how big the fire can get.
Yeah.
They're always on the lookout. Is he being hateful towards gay people? Is he being transphobic? Dave Chappelle says this or that. What is Netflix response going to be? They start this. It's always the left-leaning liberal media element on social media, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
That starts a lot of this. And you know, I don't understand what the difference is. Like I think I said this before. Lisa Lampanelli was a
Right.
white female comedian.
Right.
Her entire bit was making fun of black people. No one said anything. Like her whole, she played upon the most basic tropes of stereotypes, specifically against black men. And no one, there was no hashtags for that. No one was on Twitter outraged about it. No one was trying to cancel Lisa Lampanelli. Amy Schumer is another one.
Oh my
Okay.
God.
And she's not even funny, by the way.
She's not.
But she was another one. I guess, you know, I guess she has weight issues or whatnot. She used her weight struggles in her jokes. And so she talked about how she can still get the attention of black men because she's a white female with weight.
Damn.
But I think, so a lot of her jokes would be playing upon basic tropes having to do with black people and black men. No one said anything. But I guess we're trying to make gay people, not even just gay people, we're trying to make people on the spectrum a protected species, like they're a manatee or something. Like you just can't touch them, or else we'll put you in jail.
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, if we're gonna do that, every comedian who talks about every other group of people needs to be put on notice that this isn't gonna work anymore.
Bro, we're getting there, to be honest with you, bro. Because you mentioned Lampanelli, but bro, she's from the past. Like her comedy wouldn't go far.
Fly. Yeah, it wouldn't fly. Yeah.
If there was a new comedian out here talking like how she's talking, she'll get canceled within the first month, bro.
Yeah.
She'll have her own niche audience somewhere on some, on 4chan or something. But nevertheless, Black Twitter and everything else is gonna, cancel her.
Yeah, probably so. I don't, and this is me saying this as a black person. I don't think that forms of art should ever be restricted, because at the end of the day, they are merely a reflection of the reality. And like, I remember back when, and this is going back a long time, so anybody who watches this video who's younger might not know what I'm talking about. But when Columbine went down, the government tried to blame Eminem and Marilyn Manson. Specifically, They tried to say that those kids went and shot up that school because they listened to Eminem. Like, listening to Eminem makes you do these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not taking into account the tumultuous home, the upbringing, the background, the mental these kids are mentally compromised, not taking anything into account. It was the music that made them do this. So then we went on this national referendum trying to reevaluate whether it's okay for these things to be presented in music. And a lot of that stuff still goes on today. And I think that this is what's going on with the comedy thing. Like, you don't put a muzzle on the art, because the art is merely a reflection of the culture and the society. The art is merely a mouthpiece for what is actually happening. So if the comedians are talking about these things in their bit, and the artists are talking about this stuff in their music, you need to address the deeper existential aspect as to why these things are actually happening in society. Don't put a muzzle on the comedian. If you think Dave Chappelle is being transphobic, then how about you talk about transphobia? Let's get to the root of why people are transphobic. Not cancel Dave Chappelle, because that doesn't make transphobia go away. That just puts a muzzle on a comedian.
But
and
part
of this is other comedians and people who are for free speech and these things off, and it just causes a whole lot of shouting on different sides of the aisle.
Yeah, and I think and I agree with that, but I think part of their ideology of them fixing these quote unquote issues
is putting a muzzle on it.
Is putting a muzzle on artists.
Yeah.
And that's the dangerous part. I draw my personal line at promotions of violence.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're promoting violence against a group of people, I'm not for that. All right. I still feel like in tasteful context, people slurring people, I'll even take it there. Like, it's whatever, man. If it's all in comedy, I don't care. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I don't. And unless it's like, egregious.
You know the line, right? Exactly.
Yeah, it's right. Egregious.
Yeah, that line of demarcation between reasonable and unreasonable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And if
we all know what that line is.
Right. And if you're being genuinely comedic, let it ride, bro.
Yeah.
You're not going to like it, but there's going to be a whole bunch of people that do. So get over it, you know? And so, yeah, I had to learn that from watching comedians and growing up and stuff. They'll say something that I don't like, and I'll go, hey, that ain't right. But then I just got through laughing at a Mexican joke
Yes.
5 seconds ago.
Yeah. Right.
As soon as they say something about black people, I'm all, oh, well, you can't say that. And it's like, bro,
Yeah.
you just laughed at Mexicans for like 10 minutes.
Exactly.
So let that shit slide.
Exactly.
Take it on the chin and then go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you like that comedian anyway because he's funny. So I don't get why people are. Well, I know what it is now, and just like how all the stuff that we've been discussing, and so now, you know, they're jumping in, and like how you said with the Eminem, Marilyn Manson, I forgot they even connected those things to Columbine. But you're right, and it's the same mentality that they've been working with very actively, bro.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's gotten to the point to where self-censorship is becoming a thing now because people don't want to get canceled in the first place.
They don't want to smoke. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's working. And so what Dave Chappelle did was he did put a flag down. He did put his foot down, and he knows that censorship is a thing. And he said, I'm going to say this regardless of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why him saying that he's not coming off of it. That's why I said last time we talked about it, I was like, he knew what he was doing when he wrote that joke out. He knew he had to have known this was going to offend people, you know? And so by him doing that, I feel like this is all part of a larger plan of his to create such a dialogue, honestly.
Yeah.
So I'm for it, bro. I'm actually for it.
Yeah, I hear you. And I also think that it's important to note that Dave Chappelle can afford to do this.
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle is his fan base and his following is etched in stone. There's nothing that he can do or say, barring it being truly egregious,
right,
that can make people truly turn on him. Like his Q rating is so powerful that he is in a position where he can do this and know that at the end of the day, he will not pay the ultimate price to his career. Other comedians or other artists are not fortunate enough to be in that position. But he's earned that through what he's been able to establish over the course of, basically about 25 years now. Chappelle's been around. I think Half Baked came out in like 96. Yeah, like Dave Chappelle, people forget he's been around a while. Like Chappelle's show was 2004, bro. That was a long time ago. So he's built up this cachet, and he is his own entity. He's not beholden to promotional companies or production companies like a Kevin Hart is. Kevin Hart could never speak his mind. He'll never ever be able to say whatever he wants because he will be fired by every constituency that employs him.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave Chappelle is his own free agent, so he does not have to be worried about that. And he can be his own free agent and still be good because he has a following, a devoted fan base that is just there. It's not going nowhere. So, it's important to note because there's probably other people who look at Kate. I remember watching Kevin Hart on Joe Rogan's podcast on YouTube. And Joe Rogan asked him, like, do you ever get envious of somebody like Chappelle who can do that? And Kevin Hart was like, I'll never be able to do that because I have too many people who I'm responsible for. I have too many people who work for me. If I do that and get canceled, all of that is compromised. But I'm so jealous because Chappelle can be free to talk that way in his comedy because he is his own entity. Mm-hmm. And I'm my own entity to a certain degree, but I have people who I'm responsible for. Mm-hmm. Dave really doesn't. He's just responsible for himself. So, Kevin Hart, I'm pretty sure that Kevin Hart would love to be more authentic to who he truly is. Kevin Hart is commercial, and I'm not trying to make this about Kevin Hart, but he's commercialized now. But I'm pretty sure that Kevin Hart would love nothing more than to be soul playing Kevin Hart. And at this point, he can't do it because he's too much of a corporation, and Chappelle's not. Chappelle has somehow been able to tap into that very delicate balance, of being independently sustainable and still, I guess he's been able to tap into that balance of being independently sustainable to the point where he can still be rich, wealthy, and all of that kind of stuff, but not be beholden to other entities to the point where he has to compromise his message. And that is a balance that's difficult to achieve, clearly, because not too many people have been successful at doing that.
Right.
But I thought that video was kind of funny because you mentioned BLM. There's parallels between what's going on now with the alphabet people and what's been going on with BLM, feminism, and all of that kind of stuff. Hopefully enough people who sort of are kind of like how that guy thinks can sort of push back a little more and just tell some of these people in the media to just calm down, just like
Now,
shut up.
now, real talk. You want to talk about allies? Okay, we need people within the community to be our allies
Yeah.
and stand up and say more. Because I've heard people talk like him before, but it would be great to hear more of them speak out and say something because they make it seem as though they all agree with this.
Yeah.
They're not all agreeing with this stuff.
It seems very loud,
It's
right?
very
It seems
loud,
very loud.
and but it's the same thing with black people though.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about situations where they're like, "Oh, that's racist," oh, it's the loud people saying that.
Yeah, it is. There's this idea that there's this theory of the vocal minority.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of people are reasonable and understand nuance and know that everything isn't a blanket statement.
Right.
But those people, they're spending too much time raising kids, working, raising a family, trying to build a legacy, build a business. They're spending too much time doing that stuff to be preoccupied on social media in the comments. So there's this theory that it's the vocal minority. The people who are loudest represent the smallest percentage of the population who think like that, but they are the loudest because they make up 90% of the people who are on the internet doing all the complaining. I've heard that before. The theory. I don't think there's any statistical data to back up the idea of the vocal minority, but I've heard it several times before. I think there's some merit to it.
No, that's a good hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a hypothesis to be sure. But yeah, so that'll close out our topics for this week on the live stream. JV Wins, Dogon SS. These were two good topics. Again, I hope that there was no audio issues with the playing of that video. But if so, I'll go ahead and link that video in the description box of this video so that you can look at it at your own leisure and judge it and evaluate it for yourself. Let me just make sure I'm clear that the views expressed on this podcast are my views and opinions alone. They are my opinions. If you disagree with them, good. I don't need everybody to think like me. So I don't care if people don't like what I got to say or disagree with me. The idea is that disagreeable points of view should not lead you to cast aspersions upon anybody's character. Because I'm pretty sure I said something at some point throughout the course of this stream that pissed somebody off. But it is what it is. But on that note, man, we'll go ahead and close it out, man. Another live stream in the books. I thought this was a good conversation. You can find me on Instagram at JVWins, JVWINS. You can also find me on Twitter at Javisogden, JVISOGDEN. And I'm also at the same place on Facebook, first and last name. Check out the Conscious Approach website, full content library, consciousapproach.com. We also have a Facebook page, Conscious Approach, as well. So search that. Same spelling, same deal. If you're on this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. I certainly appreciate the support. We'll keep cranking out content on a weekly basis, as we get the momentum going. But otherwise, man, definitely catch me on my channels. I'll be around every now and again, chiming in on something that's worth my time to chime in about.
Right, yeah, and you can find me Dogon SS on Instagrams. All right, Dogon _SS. All right, you can find me here on YouTube as well. All All right, it's Dogon SS. Check out the videos that I have over there. All right, it's a party. All right. I will be going live one of these moments. Haven't done so quite yet, but I will be going live soon. But yeah, you can find me also on DraftKings. All right, I'm on DraftKings, so Dogon underscore SS over there as well. Send me an invite. I'll crush you. All right, I'll crush you. All right, so I'm also over there. So yeah, wherever you find your boy at, I'm the only Dogon SS running around here on social medias. Period. So if you see it, if you see me somewhere, go ahead and subscribe, like, or what have you, and join the party, man. Join the party.
Yeah, for sure, man. Conscious approach. Even if you're watching this video after it's posted onto the channel, man, comment. Let us know what you thought about some of the talking points that we made. We're just trying to build a community of logic. So certainly appreciate the support, as I mentioned before. In the meantime, you'll probably see me again throughout the course of the week. Or if not, you'll definitely see me again this time next Tuesday, 7:30 is when we do the live streams each and every week, barring any sort of conflict in schedule or something like that. So check us out, man. So on that note, until next time, JV wins, Dogon SS. Please keep it logical, support logical content, and we'll see you on the flip side.